Hey guys, Delora Dabbles here, and today we're going to talk about how to spin for a larger project. So we're talking about, like sweaters, jackets, blankets, whatever, that calls for, a lot of hand spun yarn. So in this specific instance, we're going to talk about the Lestrange cloak because this is the project I'm currently working on. So we need to look at specifically the yarn that is called for in this pattern. And really, all you need to know is how many yards come in, like how many yards you need for the project. So it says that you need 547 yards of a certain kind of skein, and in my size, I need 6 skeins of this yarn. I'm not trying to match grist with this yarn. I'm not trying to completely recreate this yarn. In fact, I want a loftier, lacier yarn anyway, so I'm going my own way with that. If you want to completely recreate the pattern yarn, the suggested pattern yarn, then you would want to calculate the grist of this and then try to match grist with your hand spun. I don't really do that, so that's not what this is about. This is about just making sure that you have the yardage you need to complete this project. First of all, I want a lighter, loftier yarn. I want a 2-ply yarn, not a, 3 or 4-ply plus yarn that most fingering weight yarns come in. So we need to know the weight of the yarn and how many yards you need. So we have 547 yards per skein. In my size, I need 6 skeins, so that's 3,282 yards. Very, very simple, very basic. I just wanted to make sure that you guys know where I got that number from. So now that we know how many yards we want in our finishing project, we kind of have a goal number, so I'm going to keep that number up here. Take numbers out of the equation. Now just look at the fingering weight of the yarn, the weight of the yarn, and determine what you need to make a yarn of that weight. So this is something that, a lot of people have questions about. How do I spin for a certain weight? This is what you do. You do a spinner's control card. So I spin a lot of fingering weight yarns and I spin a lot of lace weight yarns. I usually spin 45 WPI singles, 3-ply of 45. This is going to get really confusing. All right, if I take my 45 wrap per inch single, which is very thin, and I 3-ply it, I get a fingering weight. If I only 2-ply it, I get a lace weight. So I figured, okay, let me go up a size. I wonder where my really good, there it is. Okay, here we go. This is the spinning gauge that I use, so that's why I'm using the numbers 45 and 30. If you have a spinner's control card like this, and it has slightly different, I've seen them with 35 and all kinds of different ranges, but in this one, this is where I'm getting my numbers from. This is why I use 30 and 45, whereas you might use something else because you might have a control card like this that has slightly different numbers on it. Anyway, so it's all good. It's all what you typically spin. So I was like, all right, let me try going up just one notch on here. So I usually spin the 45 down here. So I was like, let me spin the 30. Let me spin 2 sets of 30 WPI singles and just apply those together and see what I get. I got fingering weight yarn on the first try. Awesome, but that doesn't help you much if you didn't get it right on the first try. So let's say that you spin 30 WPI singles, you ply them, you 2-ply them, and it's not the size of yarn that you want. Let's say that it's bigger. Let's say that you got sport weight instead of fingering weight. Well, then you would go down a WPI size. You would spin a thinner WPI, which would be like 45, like 35, 40, 45, whatever, something smaller, and then you would ply them again. This is why you want to spend very small quantities at a time, double them back on themselves, like do a ply back sample, which just means that straight off of the wheel, you take it straight off the wheel and you ply it back. And see what size that is, right? So you're going to be doing ply back samples the whole time that you're trying to figure this out. Okay, so let's say that you did this and you got lace weight. Let's say that you did 230 WPI singles, 2 ply, and you got lace weight, not fingering. That's thinner than what you want. Well, then you would go up WPI. You would spin either 20 or 25 WPI singles, ply them back on each other, and then you should get a size up. It's all about adjusting for variance until you get what you want. Once you get the size that you want and you're happy with your finished yarn's WPI, then you spin up a sample that's large enough to do math with and to knit gauge swatches with. So this gauge swatch came out perfect. That hardly ever happens for me, but anyway. So what I do is I take my sample yarn, I wash it and finish it and do everything that I would normally do if it were a full-size skein of yarn. I treat it exactly the same way. You want to make sure that everything is done exactly as how you're going to do it when you go to knit that thing with that yarn. So if you finish your yarn, make sure you finish your sample yarn in exactly the same way, of course. So then you knit your gauge swatch. Mine came out perfect. Now, adjusting size for gauge swatch is a whole topic on its own, and there are much better YouTube videos than what I could offer out there, much better explanations already. So if your gauge swatch comes out wonky at this point, then go and check that out. That's more of a knitting thing than a spinning thing, and I want this video to be more spinning centric. So my gauge swatch came out perfect. So I was like, okay, not only did my yarn come out the size that I want, the gauge swatch came out perfectly. This is the yarn that I'm going to spend the rest of this project replicating. So how do you replicate this yarn and keep it consistent throughout the whole way? And how do you make sure that you spin enough so that you have all of the yarn that you need to knit your sweater? So we know that we need 3,282 yards. It's quite a lot. So this is 27 grams. So we're going to write that down. Our sample is 27 grams. And this sample has 130 yards. So that's our sample. 27 grams of 132 yards. So we're going to get the grist, or the yards per pound, out of this. So we're going to have to do some conversions here. We're going to need to convert this into 1 pound and let that carry over. So whatever you do to the 27 grams, you have to do to the 130 yards, right? So let's see, how many grams are in a pound? So you have 453 point, what is that, 0.6, I lied, 0.6 grams per pound, right? You're going to divide that by 27. And after you do that, you're going to get your answer. So 453.6 divided by 27 is 16.8. That is basically a conversion rate, right? So this is what you're going to multiply 130 yards by to get your final yard per pound number. So 130 times 16.8 is 2,184. I cheated because I did the math before this so that you guys wouldn't have to just watch me punch numbers into a calculator this whole time. So that's how I get my yards per pound. Oops. Sorry, my cats are running amok. All right, so let me just take a minute to explain this math. Just a little minute. So you need to like try to imagine that you're making this stretch to a pound, right? So you know that you need 453 grams to make a pound, but you only have 27. So you're going to divide this by 27 so that you know how many of these 27-gram increments you need to make a pound. Each of these 27 increments has 130 yards. So if you make 16 and a half more of these, you will have a pound. So 16.8 more of these is 16.8 more of 130 yards, which is 2,184. Oh my gosh. That's going to be funny whenever y'all watch this. So anyway, that is how I get yards per pound. It's very straightforward and simple. So now we're going to erase all this because we don't need that anymore. All right, so this is our grist of this yarn that we have decided is the perfect yarn. We did the gauge swatch. Everything is on point. We know that this is the yarn that we want. Now, how much fiber do we prep? Well, we know that we're going to need a pound at least because this is 3,000 and this is 2,000. This is actually the simplest part of the math. So you're going to take 3,282 and you're just going to divide it by 2,184. And you're just going to divide it. And that number gives us, where is that number? Oh, I didn't actually write that number down. Okay, well, now you're going to have to watch me punch numbers into a calculator. So 3,282 divided by 2,184. Oh, that's weird. I hit the backspace button instead of the divide button. So silly. 2,184. And you get 1.5027 and a long string of numbers, right? So you're going to need 1.5 pounds of your wool. And that will give you 3,282 yards. So now you know how much fiber you need to prep. And you're going to prep this fiber exactly as how you prepped this sample fiber right here. So if you brush them into Rolags, you will have to brush 1.5 pounds of these into Rolags. If you spun them worsted, you will need to spin 1.5 pounds of your yarn worsted. If you spun them woolen, you will need to make sure that you spin it woolen. So in this instance, this is woolen draft, woolen spun, however you want to say it. I spun this woolen style on dyed top. So I did not brush them into Rolags. So whenever I go to spin my 1.5 pounds of fiber, I will spin woolen from top, and top is, let me just make sure that everyone knows what top is. Top is, you know, the machine, like whenever you order from Paradise Fibers and it comes in a long roving. Roving and top is sometimes interchangeable, but there is a difference between roving and top. Yes. So I'm not going to take my 1.5 pounds of fiber and brush them into Rolags. That's going to change the finished yarn. Brushing something into Rolags adds more air to it, which is going to make the yarn even loftier, which is going to skew my grist. I might get more grist. I might get 2,500 yards per pound instead of 2,184 yards per pound. You get me? And that might actually affect the gauge or the finished yarn or whatever of your project. So just make sure that you keep everything the same. And also whenever you go to do this, I knew I did not want to brush a bunch of wool into Rolags, so I made sure that I spun everything from dyed top because that's the easiest preparation method for me to do. So just Make sure that you keep all things the same as this sample once you decide that this sample is exactly what you want. You're going to keep it all consistent. So like now that you know that you have to spend 1.5 pounds, you're going to prep that 1.5 pounds exactly like how you prepped the yarn for this sample. You're going to spin it exactly like how you spun the yarn for that sample because you are going to make a spinner's control card. And this spinner's control card, even though I don't have everything filled out on it yet, I can always just eyeball, okay, is my twist angle of this yarn on my wheel the same as the twist angle as this yarn on my card? Is this single strand of yarn that I'm spinning from my fiber the same size as this one? Now, of course, I use this instead. It's a lot handier and a lot more precise, I feel like. Because these grooves, I can just set my finished yarn, or the yarn I'm currently spinning, right into the groove. And if it fits, it fits. You can tell if it's too big or too small in each of these lines. So that's why I suggest getting one of these. That's how you're going to keep it consistent. You're going to make sure that you always refer back to this little piece of cardboard, cardstock, whatever you are making your spinner's control card on. And you're going to do that throughout the entire project, and it's going to get monotonous, but you're going to get the most consistent yarn that you possibly can for your large project. I hope that by breaking down the math that you feel more confident in spinning for larger projects, and that it's not too scary, but the math really does save a lot of guesswork for you, and it helps prevent you from making disastrous mistakes like, you know, only spinning 1 pound of wool because you're like, wow, that's a whole pound, that's a lot. And then you get down to it and you're knitting for it, you run out of yarn, and now you have to think, oh man, how did I spin this yarn? What did I do to the fiber? Blah. Even if I spin 1.5 pounds of yarn and I get down to it and I don't have enough, I can always make more of the exact same yarn because I keep a spinner's control card that has everything on it. It has the yards per pound. It has my singles 30 WPI Z twist on a 10-to-1 ratio. I applied it S twist on a 10-to-1 ratio. I even have my wheel ratios on here. If you own more than one spinning wheel, you will want to make sure that you put down which of your spinning wheels you did this on, because a 10-to-1 on one wheel might be slightly different than a 10-to-1 ratio on another wheel. That's what you want to make sure of too. So as specific as you can get on this, the better chance you have of recreating this yarn later if something happens and you don't have enough yarn. But if you do all of the math as I laid it out for you, you should know exactly how much fiber you need to prep. Thanks for watching this video. If it was helpful to you, please hit like and subscribe. If you still have questions, put them in the comment section down below. I will get back to you ASAP. There's not really much else to do during quarantine right now. And until next time, happy dabbling and bye-bye.